And now, as we saw with some of the statistics touted by the police chief or the leader of the unit, right? You may say, oh, well, maybe it's justified because they're actually stopping crime. They're taking these drugs off the street. They're taking these guns off the street, things like that. Okay, you could make that case, but at what point do we draw the line between the level of violence we're seeing on innocent people that have not been convicted of a crime and the, so to speak, reward of taking some drugs and guns and stolen property off the streets? Is it really fucking worth it when we see people constantly killed in routine traffic stops and things like that? It's not worth it. And furthermore, while you have all these nice figures to tout about how these sort of units are effective and police are effective, we have been having drug busts and stings and the war on drugs and the seizing of stolen assets, which a lot of times the police departments go on to resell and then turn over into the police department for revenue, like a fucking racket, right? Asset or property forfeiture. We've been seeing this for decades and decades and decades and decades, right? And what has it done? Are the core issues that are causing the crime solved? No, because the core issues that cause crime, that cause theft, that cause domestic abuse, that cause drug crimes, all of these things are rooted in poverty. And we have to ask ourselves, for all the, quote unquote good they're doing, taking the drugs and the guns and recovering the stolen property, for all the good that we think we want to say that they're doing, how much tax dollars are we putting into it? And again, how many innocent lives are lost in the process? Isn't there a better way? Isn't there a better way to deal with it? Maybe the better way is to get rid of the artificial scarcity in our urban centers that is causing the sort of violent crime and drug-related crime. I want you guys to answer me this in the comments or tell me what you think about this. Tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, but these areas where they were directing these Scorpion units because of all the supposed 911 calls, okay, what do you think is going to do more good? 40 officers going into this area and going on a fucking killing spree and beating people and breaking down doors and all this shit? Do you think that's going to be the best way to solve it? Or do you think if we went and gave everybody a house and food and clean water and education and jobs and good infrastructure and community assets and public spaces, which one do you think is going to have a better impact on crime? 40 officers going on a fucking rampage on the inner city, or getting rid of the systemic issues that cause crime in the first place? Right. Now, why am I bringing this up? Now, like I said, kudos to the coalitions that managed to get Scorpion, terminated, that managed to get the officers not only fired but arrested. These are great. These are serious victories that increase morale for a movement, bring a focus onto the systemic issue of police violence and mass incarceration and things like that. But at the end of the day, this only gets us so far, right? And to me, when I hear pundits and things like that talk about, oh, we got rid of the Scorpion unit, it rings in my mind a lot like, oh, we're like what the Democrats did in the wake of the George Floyd protests. Oh, we're barring chokeholds. Oh, we're going to make sure everybody has body cams and things like that. To me, it just rings like sort of hollow reforms that, while, yes, they're good for the morale of our movement, encourage us to keep pushing because, oh, we've won a victory. Always great, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't do anything to meaningfully dismantle this system, right? It doesn't address the economic problems that cause crime. It doesn't stop police from going on rampages because, yes, while some of these units may be the more violent amongst them, we've seen everyday officers guilty of the same sort of stuff, right? So I want to point that out, that we have to be wary of anybody that's trying to tell us that these reforms are enough. And just because we get a couple of reforms that help us to mobilize and encourage more of a movement doesn't mean that we should say, oh, okay, the struggle is done, right? Until we've abolished the system of policing and replaced it with a better method of public safety, this issue isn't going to go away. Until we've abolished the prisons that have turned into corporate slave farms, this issue isn't going to go away. And none of these issues can go away until we meaningfully, transition away from capitalism and private appropriation as the main driving force behind our society. Because behind policing, behind imperialism, behind systemic racism is always the specter of capitalism. The specter of capitalism that takes all the resources that we, build and accrue and sends them up to the top so that, the rest of us are left in poverty and destitution that leads us towards crime and violence, right? And I think we need to drive that home. That's what we try to do on this channel, right, is always bring it back to the core issue of capitalism and imperialism and the symptoms of that, which are racism, crime, and things like that. Now, one of the last